Hi, my name is Dr. Roxanne George, and I'm your host today for Radiant Health Dialogue series on HippocratesDocs.com in collaboration with PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Today we have a wonderful guest and a valuable resource on Ayurvedic medicine, Dr. John Douillard, who's wonderful, who's based out in Colorado and is going to talk with us today about ways to prevent and treat breast cancer using Ayurvedic techniques, and about the plant-based nutrition's influence on digestion as well. So welcome, Dr. John Douillard. How are you?
Wonderful. Thanks, Dr. George, for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get into all our topic directly, just tell us a little bit about your background and how you found this way of treating your patients.
I went to India in 1986, and I literally went there for a 6-week vacation to learn Ayurvedic medicine. I ended up finding an Ayurvedic doctor who invited me to stay. I stayed there for a year and a half and ended up meeting Dr. Deepak Chopra there while I was studying. He asked me to come back and run his Ayurvedic center that he was just opening up, which turned out to be an Ayurvedic cancer center, really, which was the predominant, patients that we treated. So I've been fascinated by ancient wisdom. And when I came back from India, I was teaching medical doctors Ayurvedic medicine, and it was actually quite popular in the late 80s. And so I just kind of found this niche where there was an amazing amount of Western medical research buried in the journals that was proving this ancient medical wisdom. And not even just Ayurvedic medicine, but Chinese medicine, other traditional medicines as well. So that's what I do now at lifespa.com, is I write articles and do videos about ancient medical wisdom. And if there's science to back it up, I'm going to write about it, because I feel like, science alone can prove whatever it wants. Coffee's good, coffee's bad, right? But when you have, time-tested wisdom that's been around and still around for thousands of years later, and you have modern science, I feel like we should at least know about that or look at that. And that's what we do at lifespa.com. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I love that you've already had this, in-depth experience with Ayurvedic medicine and the cancer center that you were co-director of. What was kind of your biggest takeaway from that experience?
I was right out of India, I just finished my training, and so it was quite a wake-up call, really. But I would say that, people would come to this clinic and they would learn yoga for the first time, meditate for the first time, do these, very exotic Ayurvedic treatments, and have sattvic, plant-based food for the first time. And there were two things that really jumped, off the page in terms of what the takeaway. And one was that people would say to me that the ones who really made a difference, and some people came, they had done chemo, some people didn't do chemo, some people did both. It was there's just a hodgepodge of everything. And the ones that did seem to do the best were the ones that said, this experience of cancer or breast cancer changed my life. And I'm so grateful for that experience, is what I heard again and again and again. And it was sort of looking at this big, life-changing event that made them look within and then make really deep fundamental change on the inside. And one of the things that they would tell me was like, my life was like a race car event where I would stop at the, eating my food was like, going to the gas and putting gas in my car and going. I was just go, eating in a relaxed way, taking time to eat my food, eating what Ayurveda calls a sattvic diet, which is a, plant-based, whole food, organic, non-processed, unrefined diet, right? And we know that pesticides literally kill the microbes that help you make the enzymes that help you digest things like wheat and dairy. And what's really interesting is that our digestive system, our digestive strength, in fact, is linked to our ability to detoxify. And in just 2019, the EPA had a report that showed that 70 million tons of toxic chemicals were dumped in the American atmosphere, in 2019. And many of those we breathe in, and many of those end up in our liver, which we have to break down. So our digestive strength is linked to your detoxification strength. And if those fat-soluble environmental pollutants, the mercury from the coal mine plumes, you don't get rid of them, where do they go? They end up in your fat, in your belly, your hips, and even your breast tissue. And so understanding how to reboot and strengthen your digestion is such a critical piece of the Ayurvedic puzzle, but really from a Western medical perspective, a high percentage of people with breast cancer have underlying and digestive imbalances. And 74% of all Americans have digestive imbalances. And, I wrote a book called Eat Wheat, which was, I don't really care you eat wheat, but the point is that if you can't eat wheat, that's an indicator that something's wrong with your digestive system. And what we do in America is just take the food out, take out the wheat, the dairy, the nuts, the seeds. I mean, obviously dairy's got issues, but the lectins and the nightshades and the goitrogens, all of a sudden, all the foods are being taken out. And studies show that when you take foods out of the diet, that the immune system starts to become compromised, that those harder to digest lectins and grains and nuts and seeds, the anti-nutrients that protect them, they irritate to a minor degree, but they stimulate our gut immunity, which is 70% of our immune response. And when you don't have those foods because you can't digest them, and I know if you don't feel good eating them, why would you eat them? Yes, stop eating them, but fix the cause. Because if you let those undigested proteins and fats, the gluten in dairy, for example, the anti-nutrients or the environmental pollutants go undigested into your small intestine, they will be too big to get into your blood, and they'll find their way into the garbage can, which is your lymphatic system. And your breast is loaded with lymphatic tissue, and that's, that's the beginning, the upstream cause of problems that can affect people downstream, either in their breast tissue or other places as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of unpack the whole digestion part of it too, because I think there's a lot more research now about the gut biome and our bacteria that live in our intestines and how that helps us break down the food. And can you talk more about the certain types of foods that help feed, it's actually feeding our bacteria and our biome that's, creating some of that protection, right?
It's a great point. I think it's really important for folks to sort of troubleshoot their digestive system as part of their, breast cancer prevention and treatment, right? So let's say you can't eat wheat. That's a protein, that's a gluten. You can't digest it. That means you probably don't have enough stomach acid to break down that protein. But let's say you can't eat fatty food, eat greasy fried food. Not that you should eat greasy fried food, but you should be able to, right? You shouldn't have heartburn and indigestion or it just sits there for hours. So if you can't digest greasy fried food, that's an indication you have probably some type of liver congestion or what is a medical term called bile sludge. And bile sludge comes from most of the undigested or undigestible fats, the cooking oils, the vegetable oils, the canola oil, the safflower oil, sunflower oil, all these have been bleached and boiled and deodorized to such an extent that we can't digest them. You put those oils in a loaf of bread, which is in most of the bread that you buy in the store, and that bread doesn't go bad anymore. I'm old, I'm 64. When I was a kid, bread would go bad in a day. It would be hard. And now they put oil in it and it never goes bad. Why? Because the bugs on the counter won't eat those oils. And when you eat that bread with that oil in it, your bugs won't eat it. So where does all the oil that's been highly processed go that the bugs normally would eat oil, won't eat that oil? Where does it go? Right to your liver. And your liver is like, whoa, I can't deal with this stuff. So it creates something called bile sludge. The number one elective abdominal surgery in America today is getting your gallbladder removed. Mm-hmm. And the gallbladder isn't just about emulsifying fats. It regulates your bowel movements. No bile, no bowel movements. No bile, no acid in your stomach, because bile, most people don't know, is a natural buffer for the acid in your stomach. So if you eat something like some gluten that requires a very strong acid, or some fried food that requires a lot of bile to emulsify it, your stomach's going to send a message to your liver and say, I need some bile. And the liver, if it's congested and if you've been constipated, which means all the toxins from your intestines that get reabsorbed through the enteric cycle back to your liver, congesting your liver, causing bile sludge. Now your liver going, I don't make that bile like I did in the old days. So what your stomach will do is one of two things. It'll hold on to the acid and wait for the bile, the green light to turn on to buffer all that acid. And you get heartburn, indigestion, and GERD, which your stomach gets pushed up against your diaphragm, which literally affects how you breathe. And then, or your stomach will just turn the fire down and say, hey, you guys don't make the bile, I can't make the acid. So your stomach and your liver coordinatedly dial down digestive strength. And now you can't eat much of anything. Undigested proteins, environmental pollutants, they go undigested in your intestinal tract. They rip your intestinal lining to shreds. They affect your protective barrier. Now you have a vulnerable intestinal lining. Those proteins and fats are too big. This is right out of the journals, are too big to get into your blood. They get into your lymphatic system, and your lymphatic system gets congested. That causes weight around your belly, causes, tiredness. Your lymph's trying to deliver those fats as good energy, as fats, as energy, as an energy source for every cell of your body. But if your lymph system's all clogged up from all these undigested proteins and fats, you can't deliver that energy. Your lymph system carries your immune system, so your immune system's stuck in traffic. And of course, your lymph is the garbage can. And if it's overwhelmed with upstream undigested proteins and fats, you're going to have lymph congestion, which can cause weight around your belly, your hips, as well as your breast tissue. And that's why it's so important. So people who have lymph concerns, are you tired, lethargic? Do you have brain fog? Do you get tired after a meal? Do you have allergies, hypersensitivity reactions? Do your rings get tight on your fingers? Do you swell? Do you have aches and pains that move around your body? Prior to your menstruation, do your breasts become tender and swollen? These are all indicators that your lymph system's backing up. And what's neat about Ayurveda is they treat the lymph system first. Like we evaluate the drainage systems. That's what the lymph is, a big drainage system for your body. And if the drains are clogged, like in your house, you got trouble, right? So what we do in Western medicine, we look at the blood, which is like the faucets bringing everything in, but we don't really address the drains so much. But I have to tell you, there's volumes of research. We have one of the free gifts we're giving is this lecture is my whole Miracle of Lymph ebook, which has over 100 scientific references to show you exactly what the lymph does. And nobody knows about the lymphatic system, where we have a traditional system of medicine that was founded on lymph. The study of the lymph is called rasa. Rasa means lymph. Rasayana means the study of longevity. Literally, the study of longevity was the study of your lymphatic system. And your breast tissue is so critically involved with lymph. And if that's congested, problems can start. You get fibrocystic breast issues, or other issues can happen in your breast, and that can be reversed with understanding how to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think one of the reasons I was so excited about this interview too was because it is such a different perspective. We don't talk about the lymphatic system that much, in medicine in general. We know there are, the qualities of the lymphatic system, but on ways on how to improve it and treat it and decongest it, right, are sometimes not addressed in full capacity. So that's one of the reasons I love this interview today. So, and it's just like other parts of the body, just getting out of the body's way so it can heal itself, right? So if we stop kind of pouring in those toxins into the lymphatic system or stop congesting it, the body will do what it needs to do, I think. So how quickly, or what kind of changes have you seen on, how quickly have you seen people change their lymphatic drainage or heal their lymphatic system? Have you had
That's a great question. Usually within a couple of weeks, I expect to see with my patients, I expect to see significant changes. Otherwise, they have my email, they call me and they let me know. So if you don't feel better in a couple of weeks, complain. Let me know what's going on, because we haven't hit the right needle. But I think that, in terms of your first question, what foods can we use for that? Well, I think understanding, like from the perspective of your liver, how do you decongest? If you have issues with fatty foods, what do you do? Well, fatty foods, one of my favorite drinks is, I call it the ABC juice, which is apple, beet, and celery. And you can cook it, or you can just take it raw and blend them. Like I'll usually take I try to get the smallest piece I can find. I'll throw it in a blender. I'll take a celery stick and a half an apple, I'll throw it in the blender, a little bit of water, and ends up with 6 to 8 ounces of that. And I have that with my breakfast. And those are what are called cholagogues. And they flush out the liver and the gallbladder, which is really, really important. Any type of leafy green is going to help increase bile flow. fenugreek, which is an old Ayurvedic, which is very still common in America. That increases the contractibility of your gallbladder by 75%. Turmeric, classic Ayurvedic spice, increases the contractibility of your gallbladder by 50%. So there's so many things that you could do, radishes, artichokes, so many things you can eat that will help increase your bile flow. And of course, all of your leafy greens are not only really good for your liver and your bile flow, but they're really important for your lymphatic system. All the alkalizing foods will help your lymph. But most important are the foods that make your white shirt turn red, which is like berries and cherries and pomegranates and beets, anything that has those dyes that were traditionally used to color things, blackberries, blueberries, those antioxidants, those polyphenols in those are powerful lymphatic movers. And so always looking for those colorful foods in your diet as well. And then, of course, hydration is really important for your lymphatic system, as well as exercise, moving, which is, really, really critically important as well. And then where people who have, where they can't break down wheat or dairy, they've got to strengthen their stomach, right? So ginger, there's a really, ginger is a phenomenal agent for your stomach. And ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, and cardamom, 5 spices that are classically used for rebooting digestive strength, particularly helping to coordinate the stomach's production of acid, liver producing of bile, duodenal, pancreatic enzymes, all have to coordinate properly upstream to make sure you have a healthy microbiome downstream. And of course, if you're eating foods that are not organic and they've got pesticides on them, they kill the bugs that make the enzymes to help you digest these foods. So that becomes a problem. And if you're eating processed oils, that collects, as you're shoveling out the junk, you're shoveling it back in with all these highly processed foods. And the problem is most restaurants, even the best restaurants, they give you the cheapest possible oil they can find. So you have to be really careful in restaurants. You got to be thinking like, just make sure everything you eat is just, steamed or really, really clean, as clean as possible. When a lot of the vegan foods have a lot of these processed oils in them. So you have to be really careful.
Yeah, we are getting a little more vegan junk food nowadays, huh?
Yeah, right. And it tastes really good too, but you gotta be careful.
Right. And, for our viewers where they, always struggle with that debate between organic and non-organic, or do you follow like the Dirty Dozen, or is it just across the board, or,
Yeah, no, I think that the Dirty Dozen is a great way. Like avocados, for example, are really usually pretty clean. So you don't have to buy the extra, $1 per avocado for organic. You can do that. I think it's really good. Iodine is also a lymph mover in Ayurvedic medicine, and iodine is something that is deficient, much more significantly so in vegans. And iodine has been shown in studies to protect the breast tissue from uptaking toxic estrogens, not only, environmental estrogens as well. So, making sure you have, a good amount of seaweed in your diet is really critically important for breast health as well. And Ayurvedically, it's a lymph mover. It was the antibiotics of the 1800s. So it's something that, and it's very deficient. And, we have about 50% less iodine in our diet than we did, 30 years ago, because we eat sea salt, not iodized salt. They don't use iodine to clean, clean some of the meat industry and the dairy industry, and a lot of other food industries use iodine to clean all the equipment. They don't do that anymore. And the bread, they used to put iodine in the bread. Now they took that out and they put bromide in the bread, which is a toxic halogen that competes with the iodine receptors. So you got to be careful. And fluoride competes with those iodine receptors as well, which is in our water. And so making sure and iodine is way more specific for those receptors. So all you got to do is make sure you have ample amount of iodine, and you'll end up with that breast supportive health that you're looking for. So that's really important as well.
Yeah, there are definitely great sources of iodine in seaweed, as you mentioned. There's a kelp seasoning that has a large amount of iodine in it that sometimes you can use as a salt alternative. which is healthier and has a, a good source of iodine in it if people are looking for good sources of that. And so for, going back to the whole lymphatic drainage system, I mean, so if we cut out some of these fattier foods, things should sort of decongest and get better with our lymphatic drainage, right? So is there a difference between like cutting out saturated fats and unsaturated fats, or is it pretty equivalent either way? We just should have a low fat.
Well, I think the thing is the most important piece of that puzzle is the highly processed fats. If you're eating a diet of, highly processed cooking oils, and then you're having also with that a saturated fat diet, and with that a highly processed carbohydrate diet, you're going to be in trouble, And that's why a vegan diet is the only diet that's been shown to cure heart disease, is because it strips away all of that. And it just, so it's the absolutely, best, cleanest, most medicinal diet that's ever been studied. So there's just no doubt about that, vegetable oils, it depends on which vegan camp you live in, whether you take vegetables or not. But if you're going to do a vegetable oil, I would say the only one I would recommend would be, or the one I would recommend most highly would be olive oil. And making sure that you get the highest quality olive oil, because there's a lot of adulteration that takes place.
Right. But eating like whole nuts and seeds shouldn't, in a sensible amount should be fine. It's not those kinds of.
I think that's the way to do it. That's, obviously, one of the issues with being a vegan is you have to be careful of, omega-3 fatty acid deficiencies. And that's one of the ways to make sure you do it is making sure you're getting plenty of nuts and seeds. I live on nuts and seeds. I don't limit them. But I don't eat any other junk. I think it's the combination. If you eat a lot of nuts and seeds and you're eating a bunch of garbage oils and a bunch of processed food, it's just a perfect storm for poor health, really, not just breast health.
Right. Absolutely. So I know another big part of what you do is to treat patients different breathing techniques and sort of physical ways to move their lymphatics around. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. And this is really important because, one study showed that a significant number of breast cancer patients had congestion in the anterior diaphragmatic lymph nodes. So your diaphragm is this big major muscle that pulls, when it contracts, it pulls air all the way down into the lower lobes of your lungs, where the predominance of oxygen exchange takes place. And because we sit around and we don't walk or move as much as we did, even if we exercise a lot, it's like an hour a day, but the rest of the time we're sitting in our car or at our office or whatever, our diaphragm doesn't contract. They did a study with elite athletes, and only half of them had a diaphragm that was fully contracting and fully relaxing. And so if they didn't have a diaphragm that's working, probably, we don't. So it's really important to understand the value of that. And so there's a breathing technique used in every single hospital in the world. It's called inspiratory muscle training. And it's a technique of breathing that strengthens the muscles of inspiration, which is your diaphragm. And in Ayurvedic medicine, that exact same breathing technique is called pratyoloma, which is a breathing technique that I taught on my little intro. And what that does is it forces you partially close your nostrils a little bit, and you breathe in against that resistance, and that makes your diaphragm contract. Otherwise, it doesn't really have to. So when you do that inhalation, you really should feel your diaphragm contracting when you do that. So the breathing is breathing in. And if you do that and feel with this resistance here, you'll feel under your rib cage, your diaphragm contracting, maybe like in a way you've never felt it before, right? So and the second part of that breathing technique that I promised to teach you guys, maybe as important, or maybe even more important, and it's what Ayurveda calls breath retention, which is what Western medicine calls intermittent hypoxia. And the studies on it, and all that means is like a little bit of air hunger, getting used to that, where we know, right, that a little bit of calorie restriction increases Nobel Prize winning, autophagy and stem cell activation, right? So a little bit less food, right, would be really good, because Americans eat 100% of the food that they need, and then we go and eat another 100%, right? And studies say if we could just eat like 30% less than the extra 100%, still eating 70% more than we actually need, that all these amazing benefits happen in your lymphatic system, your liver health, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, all these amazing things begin to your lipids, your fats, your cholesterol, all of it dramatically changes. So a little bit of less food and a little bit less oxygen. Sounds crazy, right? But here's what happens. When you actually have a little bit of intermittent hypoxia and you get used to being comfortable with a little bit more CO2, carbon dioxide tolerance, it's the CO2 levels when you hold your breath that actually trigger the release of oxygen from your blood into your tissues. So you go to the doctor and they put an oximeter on your finger, you have 98% oxygen. That's what's in your blood. That's not what's in your breast tissue. That's not what's in your brain, your muscles, your heart. That's just what's in your blood. The only way you get that to release from your blood is to let the CO2 levels go up. But most people overbreathe, and we sit around and we breathe little shallow breaths in, little shallow breaths out. So we breathe in, studies show, 75% more oxygen than we actually can use. So we breathe 75% of it right back out. And as we do that, we keep blowing off too much CO2. So we never let the CO2 levels go up, partly because we breathe really shallow, like little rabbits, and the lower lobes of your lungs, because the rib cage has this thing called elastic recoil, which is squeezing on your heart and your lungs. So you have this big major muscle, your diaphragm, to suck that air all the way down to expand your rib cage. But if you don't breathe down there, this just gets tighter and tighter and becomes literally a cage for your breast tissue. Your anterior diaphragmatic lymph nodes get congested. All the lymphs around the breast can get congested because this is supposed to move. Your major lymphatic pump is your diaphragm. It sucks all the waste off out of your abdominal cavity. So that's what your diaphragm is doing. It's sucking all the lymph junk out of your gut back to your heart to be reprocessed to your liver and to be detoxified. But if that system is not contracting, relaxing completely, number one, you're going to breathe in the upper chest. That's going to cause the receptors here, bear in the woods receptors. So you're going to feel stressed and more anxious. And CO2 turns out to be, as you build it up, it's a sedative. In fact, studies show it's more tranquilizing. So when we overbreathe oxygen and we get anxious, and we underbreathe or breathe out too much CO2, we lose our natural sedation. So that ratio and that balance is completely out of whack. So here's the deal. Everybody knows that breast cancers, any type of cancer, cannot survive in a highly oxygenated environment, right? And there's these breast cancer stem cells that are kind of rogue stem cells that produce more breast cells. Well, how do you reverse that? Well, intermittent hypoxia means holding your breath, being comfortable with a little bit of air hunger, building it comfortably over time. What happens is you increase, and this is well documented, massive increase in stem cells. Just like with calorie restriction, you get stem cells with a little bit of air hunger. EPO, erythropoietin, which is a hormone that Lance Armstrong got busted for, you make your own. Nitric oxide, the 1998 Nobel Prize winning chemical, if it was a panacea that cured everything, you produce on your own. The transcription factor, I think, is 53. They call it the guardian of your genome. Protects your whole genetic code from expressing genetic predispositions, is activated by a little bit of air hunger. And this is not, we have to kind of breathe, you do these exercises to figure it out now, but historically, we breathe in all 5 lobes of our lungs naturally and completely. When I first wrote my first book, we did research on nose breathing and mouth breathing called Body, Mind, and Sport. I interviewed medical doctors and pulmonists and comparative anatomists, and they all told me, you know, you don't need 5 lobes of the lungs. You can just breathe plenty good in the upper 2. And most people only breathe in the upper 2 and they never access the lower 3. I'm going like, there's something missing in that equation, right? And here in Ayurvedic medicine, there's literally hundreds of different breathing techniques. So how do you do comfortable intermittent hypoxia? And that's what I promised you guys. And I think this is so important. So you do the pratyoloma, which is the partially closed nostril, inspiratory muscle technique. You're doing a breathing technique that's used in every single hospital in the world for heart failure, lung failure, and it's been shown to reverse GERD and hiatal hernia and reflux. So here we have, locked in the medical journals, a breathing technique that actually has been shown in study after study after study to actually reverse heartburn and GERD, reflux. Instead of taking a pill, you gotta do is breathe, right? Because when the diaphragm is contracting and relaxing, your esophagus goes right through it with the vagus nerve. And if that diaphragm is completely contracting and not massaging that and activating that, you get compromise in the lower esophageal sphincter, and you get all this, Ayurveda calls it upward moving digestion, heartburn, reflux, where the stomach gets pushed against the diaphragm and the diaphragm now can't contract. So strengthening that diaphragm has been shown in really an amazing number of studies to support healthy upper digestion, which is one of the key things we're trying to deal with here. So the breathing technique is you partially close your nostrils, and everybody can do it with me right now. You breathe in, partially close your nostrils, breathe in, all the way in, and then let it out through your nose. And then in again, all the way in, and you'll feel your diaphragm contract, and then let it out. And again. Each time you do it, you'll see you get a little bit more, you'll feel your diaphragm. Do that about 10 times. And on the final exhalation, let it all the way out, and then just hold your breath. And if you have a little timer there, you can see what your timer is, and just hold your breath until you feel a little bit of discomfort. As soon as you feel a discomfort, then you go right back into another 10 of these. And do another 10 of that. On this 10th one, exhale all the way out, hold your breath, and do a breath inhale. And you do 3 rounds of that. And if you had an oximeter reading on your finger, a little oximeter, you can get it for $20 on Amazon or whatever, you'll watch your numbers go from 98% oxygen in your blood to the low 90s, into the 80s, and sometimes even into the 70s, which means that where is all that oxygen going? It's leaving your blood and it's blasting into your tissues. And that's what causes the stem cell activation. And it's also been shown to increase apoptosis, which is cellular time death, which is really important for breast health as well, to kind of take care of and eradicate some of these rogue cells that are dividing. Ayurveda, defines cancers as the loss of memory of proper function of the cells, where the cells, because they're not getting the blood in maybe as well, because their waste is not getting out, because the lymph system's congested, because of upstream underlying digestive issues that can sometimes be really apparent and sometimes be sort of subtle. I had one guy in my practice, he had a belly that was way out to here, and I said, "How's your digestion?" He said, "Perfect." And I was like, then I had to describe to him, like, that extra weight around your belly is an indicator. It's really a red flag that something really is wrong. Your whole intestinal lymph, the lion's share of your lymph, which is around your belly, is congested. And that's your immune system. That's your delivery of fats for every cell of your body for energy. And that's your garbage can. It's clogged. It needs to be emptied. But he had, he didn't have any digestive problems at all. So we have to be a little bit more investigative as we kind of evaluate what really run a fine-tooth comb through those digestive issues. Like I don't eat X, Y, and Z. So that doesn't mean you solve the problem. People tell me, I don't eat this. I always ask people to eat greasy fried food. They go, "Oh no, I would never eat that." I go, "Yeah, I get that. But how do you feel if you did?" Mm-hmm. And then when they go, "Oh, I don't know. It has been so long." But when I dig in deeper and I realize, yeah, if they did eat that, they would feel terrible. And that means that your liver is not detoxifying or producing enough bile like a Pac-Man to emulsify all those fats, scrub your little villi in your intestinal tract, and keep your intestinal barrier healthy. And when that breaks down, the next thing on the list is your lymph, and your lymph is the drainage for all your cells. And and if you're not breathing to help that lymph around your chest move properly, you're going to get lymph congestion around your breast tissue as part of the vulnerability of breast cancer. It's not like it's a direct link, because everybody's genetically wired differently. But these are the things we can all do to to protect ourselves, before the problem comes.
Absolutely. I know some of our viewers are going to be so excited to try this breathing technique. So I want to get a few kind of parameters around it. How will people know? Because it's so interesting when you had mentioned that, even in your challenge video about the athletes, I found that if they're not, if their diaphragms aren't contracting all the way, it's such intensity, right? They're breathing, they're working, they're running. How do we know if our diaphragms, how do we know we're doing better?
Well, I think, one of the things is one of the ways to correct over breathing is to breathe through your nose, right? When you breathe through your nose, you produce nitric oxide in the paranasal sinuses. And when you breathe through your mouth, you produce 0. And nitric oxide is the Nobel Prize winning panacea molecule from 1998. so it turns out that when you breathe through your nose, these turbinates in your nose drive the air all the way down into the lower lobes of your lungs, where all the oxygen exchange and CO2 exchange takes place. And your lower lobes of your lungs, which is a gravity-fed system, most of the alveoli for exchange are down in the lower parts, right? And your breathing turns out to be one of the primary ways to get rid of fat-soluble waste, to get rid of toxic waste, environmental pollutants, which are fat-soluble. Mercury from the coal mine plumes are fat-soluble. We breathe those toxins out of our system. But if your rib cages become really tight, go for a walk. Breathe through your nose. Count how many steps you take on the inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps for your nasal breathing inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4 for your nasal breathing exhale. And then keep trying to lengthen that, 5 and 5, 10 and 10, 20 and 20. You keep trying to make your breath longer and slower and deeper. Research on slow breathing. And there's so much research on I've written so many articles on breast health and breathing techniques, and how the breathing techniques have been shown to increase lymphatic flow, reduce pain, support healthy states of anxiety and depression from the and also support healthy recovery from surgeries after breast cancer. There's just so many studies on yoga and breathing and meditation for those. It's really quite phenomenal.
Absolutely. So for some of our patients, are there any patients you don't like, you would say, maybe this is not the technique for you? For some of our viewers, if they're having any like COPD issues or certain other disease states that you would say, maybe, slow down on this or try.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the pratyoloma, the inspiratory muscle training, that's used in hospitals for heart failure and COPD and all these type of very severe, health concerns, and for COVID, oh my gosh, if you don't have a diaphragm that's contracting fully and relaxing fully, and you have a and you come down with a viral infection that's compromising, breathing function, you really want to make sure you go into that with a strong diaphragm. So that's one of the things. And I wrote an article called Strengthen Your Lungs Now, Pratyoloma, because that was when COVID first came out. It's like, you guys need to get your diaphragm working really soon and quickly, because it's so important. But the breath holding, that would be something that I would only introduce, if you are, kind of in a healthy state. If you have any, cardiovascular issues or you're on blood thinners and things like that, I would definitely check with your medical doctor and make sure that it's okay for you to do some of this these breathing techniques, because they are a little bit more aggressive. But for the most part, and always just, do it very comfortably. Never do these breathing techniques while you're driving or in a swimming pool or anything like that. You would never do anything like that. But be kind and gentle to your body. Learning how to breathe through your nose is critical. And that was my first book about the research we did on nose breathing versus mouth breathing and exercise. And we produced, in the mouth breathing, they were fight or flight. The nervous system was in a fight or flight state. Their brains went into a very aggressive, incoherent beta state, which is a stress state. These same high school athletes came back and did the exact same breathing technique, and their breath rates went from 47 breaths per minute to 14 breaths per minute. Their brain went into an alpha state, brainwave coherence. Their brainwave became coherent, which means all the parts of the brain doing the same thing. And their parasympathetic nervous system, normally in exercise, fight or flight goes up and parasympathetic goes down. In our studies, the two opposite nervous systems coexisted, which means you were calm and very dynamic at the same time, which is what yoga is about, being in this pretzel-like posture, right? But your breathing creates this internal calm. And this is something that Ayurveda likes to mimic nature. Like an atom has a nucleus is very still, and the electrons spin around it, or a solar system has a sun in the middle with things spinning around, or a hurricane has a big eye of the storm, which is calm, where the most powerful winds spin around it. This is a law of nature that we mimic in yoga by creating this inner calm, which happens from your breathing, because when you breathe all the way down, you activate the vagal nervous system, which flips your brain into an alpha state. We proved that during vigorous exercise. And it was the first time it has ever been proven before. We published it in the International Journal of Neuroscience in the mid 1990s. So we absolutely can change our brain chemistry, and we can also change our neuroplasticity. I mentioned a minute ago, or in the very beginning of this lecture, how one of the things that I heard from my cancer patient when I first came back from India was, it changed my life. Like, I was just out there just blasting away, getting dopamine reward chemistry in every possible way I could, right? I was just like, killing it in my business and making money here and doing all the reward chemistry, shopping, more food, more of this. And they realized that there was nothing on the inside, and we have patterns of behavior, old patterns of behavior that are literally written into the white matter of our brain. And all the Ayurvedic yoga breathing that I've written so many articles about this, the common denominator for every Ayurvedic breathing technique was they changed neuroplasticity. They literally changed the elasticity of your brain chemistry. We literally can rewrite those old patterns, those protective patterns we created as kids that we're still projecting on the screen as adults. And we know that's true because when we go home for the holidays, we act like a 4-year-old again, right, with our family and stuff. So we all know that we carry these old emotional impressions, but we don't know that we're projecting them on the screen in our daily lives. And we keep running the same program, which is protective and survival, as opposed to feeling safe enough to, I like to say, open the delicate petals of your flower and let something real out, like who you truly are out, as opposed to being that person who's involved in making them happy and doing this for them and pleasing everybody, as opposed to feeling safe enough to let who you are out. That's a big part of Ayurveda. And that's the side benefit of breathing, is you change your neuroplasticity so you feel more conscious, more self-aware of what's real and what's not real. It's powerful.
Right. It is really powerful. And I love that idea of, not being stuck in these, habit loops or these neural networks. I mean, we can literally quiet those and kind of, go into these other, find that center to create these other neural networks. And I think that's a big part of, Ayurvedic medicine, as well as sort of lifestyle medicine. It almost, maybe doesn't outright say it, but a lot of these techniques are being used more and more as, it sort of filters down into the, Western medicine, or lifestyle medicine. I don't know that it's quite into the Western medicine, but lifestyle medicine, forums. So I think that's fantastic that it plays, the breathing, the exercise, obviously our diets and nutrition play a big part in that. As far as exercise, you mentioned yoga. Is there certain types of exercise that are beneficial, especially with breast cancer patients? Is it matter, or is it just, go on, get out there and do your thing?
Yeah, which real quick about lifestyle, there's a study that showed that changing your lifestyle, diet, exercise routine, getting rid of alcohol, eating a plant-based diet, all these things, so definitely decrease your risk in one study of breast cancer by 35%. So it's, it's a very, very real thing. With regard to exercise, it's also really important to breathe through your nose, because that's an opportunity. When I wrote my book, Body, Mind, and Sport, I felt like if you can breathe through your nose and maintain this internal state of calm during vigorous exercise, that's just a model for the stress in your life. And studies show that when you learn how to breathe deep and long and slow, activate the lower lobes of your lungs, which activate the vagal response, which tells your brain the war's over, that life's not an emergency anymore, those breathing techniques are during a pranayama exercise kind of breathing period, or during exercise, studies show that translates into how you breathe during the rest of your day. So the goal would be to breathe throughout the day at about 6 breaths per minute. So that's a 5-second inhalation and a 5-second exhalation. So doing the breathing techniques and breath holds, as I taught you, or doing nasal breathing exercise, and I've got so many articles about that as well, how to do that. You start to train yourself to breathe in this 6 breaths per minute, which has actually been shown to, that rhythm has been shown to actually block the chemoreceptors in your brainstem to be reactive to CO2. So that breathing rhythm actually allows you to hold on to a little bit more CO2, which then disassociates the oxygen from your blood into your tissues, and now we're hyperoxygenating your tissues, and that hypoxia that many of us live with in our tissues is actually reversed by literally changing how you breathe. And you're going to do that 26,000 times a day anyway. So you might as well, I figured, hey, if we're going to do this anyway, why don't we just figure out how to do it right?
Right, absolutely. So any exercise that we can get people to do, but the breathing, pay attention to how you're
Right.
breathing.
So breathe through your nose. And if you have to breathe through your mouth when you're going for a workout, you went from a calm parasympathetic rebuild, digest, rejuvenate nervous system response to that exercise to an emergency break your body down to build yourself up response. So it's not that we can't be in sympathetic, activation, but if your whole life is fight or flight and your exercise is fight or flight and your emotional state is fight or flight, the body's going to break down. So your exercise becomes, if you use your breathing techniques during exercise as a way to reestablish that calm during stress, it's a model that allows you to handle that stress during your daily life from a more composed place. You create I call it the bigger the eye of the hurricane you can create, the more calm, the more you can pull back that bow, create that internal silence, the more powerful your winds and the more accurate your shot. If you're pulling back the arrow and you're moving the thing around, you're not calm at all right on the inside. And then you shoot the arrow, who knows where it's going to go. It's dangerous. But if you pull that arrow back and you hold it perfectly still and shoot it, they call it, it's a metaphor in Ayurveda for transformational change, freeing yourself from old emotional patterns because you're acting from the deep truth of you, not the version of you that wants everybody to like you.
I love that. I love that analogy. I think that's so profound. People can really, I think that really resonates, especially in current times with our pandemic going on where, we feel like we're not in the center. We're kind of in those winds, being thrown around with everything
They're
going
dangerous, those winds,
Yeah. So, I have so many more questions. I did want to specify before we go, just you had mentioned it in passing, but I did want to make a point out of it. The Sattvic plant-based diet. So I want to spell that for people. So Sattvic. And I just wanted to kind of, define that real quick, just so our patients and viewers understand that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful about this is what I love about Ayurveda is the more I understand what they were talking about, the more profound it was. Because the Sattvic diet means that you cook your food in a relaxed way, slow cook, low heat. We all know that that's really important. It's whole food, organic food, seasonal food, foods that are in season. Studies show that if deer, when they eat out of season, they have bugs for bark in the winter and different bugs in their gut to digest leaves in the summer. But with the study, they gave them barks in the wintertime, it caused such a level of indigestion, it actually almost killed the deer.
Wow.
And my second book was called The 3-Season Diet, Eating with the Harvest, the 3 harvests. And it was all about seasonal eating. And when I read that, I was like, are you kidding me? Deer die when they eat out of season? What about us? We have no idea. And now we have all this amazing science that says, yep, the bugs in the soil change from one season to the next. And when you eat seasonal food that are organic, you're going to put, that's sattvic, that's whole food from the ground. You put it in your body, cook it properly, slow heat so you don't kill all the bugs. You're inoculating your gut with these really good microbes. In addition, if you're eating in a calm, peaceful, loving, kind way, our emotions impregnate the bugs on the food. That's been studied. You put a healthy person next to an anxious person, all of a sudden the bugs in the healthy person become anxious. We are who we hang out with. And the microbiology, these little bugs are so impressionable. They are like the information molecules that are out in the world. And if there's pesticides or bad environmental pollutants, we're going to inhale them. And through horizontal transfer of genetic material through our intestinal tract, we're going to take those bugs into our gut, right into our genetic code. And they're going to tell our genetic code, hey, there's glyphosate out there now. There's mercury in the air out there is bad. And we have to then genetically figure out a way to stay alive because we are the host for the bugs. So the bugs want us around. So they support the genetics to keep this whole thing happening, right? So that's the beauty of these microbes is they feel everything. And they're giving us information how to adapt and change. But if we overwhelm them with toxic chemicals and things like that, and we don't have a system to be able to handle and be adaptive, like a lymphatic system that has a good trash can, you're going to pay a price for not being able to keep up. Or if your digestion is broken down and you can't digest properly. So sattvic food is how you eat the food in a relaxed, calm way, right? We know when you eat your food in a relaxed way, your parasympathetic system increases, which is the rest and digest system. If you're being chased by a bear, the last thing you're thinking about doing is ordering pizza, right? Your fight or flight system, neurologically turns off your digestive ability. But when you're relaxed, parasympathetic activation is on, and you activate digestibility. So eating in a relaxed, calm way is, Ayurveda 101 really. And now we have this amazing amount of science saying, yep, we should eat relaxed in a calm way. We should eat our breakfast and our lunch. We should have a lighter supper from the word supplemental, and there's hard science to back that up. All the circadian rhythms are now proving breakfast and lunch are the important meals, supper, not the important meal. But these big late dinners that are the American way, they've caused some problems, and science backs that up.
Absolutely. So let's stop eating our dinner in front of the TV and in front of the
Right,
news. Maybe, sit at your table with your family, share wonderful stories with your family to help with digestion and your overall health. So we are here at the end already of this interview, but I just wanted to give you a chance to just, sum up things in a final thought and let people know where they can get in contact with you.
Sure. Well, I think we covered a lot, and I think the big thing is, eating. Think about how and when and what you eat. How, relax, when, big meals in the middle of the day or with breakfast as well. And then what, try to be thinking about, plant-based, whole food, non-processed, unrefined, organic, seasonal food. And then of course, you do all that, and then you start to practice your breathing, because most of us, because we sit around too much, we have to keep strengthening that diaphragm. That diaphragm is one of the biggest and most important muscles in your body. And it does so much for what's above the diaphragm, which is your heart and your lungs, your chest and your breast, as well as what's below, and all your digestive organs. In Ayurveda, 85% of all disease comes from a weak digestion. So that's where we always start. And then we evaluate the function of the drainage, the lymph system first. And if that's compromised, the digestion's the cause. And that's where we work. And I think if we do that, plus breathing, hopefully good things happen in every aspect of your health. And you can find me at lifespa.com. We have a newsletter. We have, I think, 135,000 subscribers, and we have videos on YouTube. I think we have over 10 million YouTube views now. People are just loving how they can grab their own health and take it, in charge of their own health. And all that information, we have thousands of articles and videos, are all for free at lifespa.com. So come join us, kind of learn more about ancient wisdom and modern science. The two together, they belong together. And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We appreciate it so much. We hope this has been a valuable resource to all our viewers, and I know it has been just one of our most fantastic interviews in this series on Radiant Health Dialogues to help you all have radiant health. So thank you, Dr. John Douillard, for being with us, and we hope to have another talk with you in another series. And for all of you out there, do check out his website, a huge resource. Definitely, look around, look at the YouTube videos, the ebooks. There's so much great information out there. So thank you, Dr. John Douillard, for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.